Audio is on. That's cool. Audio is on. Fusion camera is on. And here we go. Main camera is on. Ready? 1, 2. What is going on, everyone? Tim from Tierfon Orbital Dookie. Count Dooku. What can we say about the Count? Let me gather myself here. Those of you who have been following me for a while know that I usually don't like this hilt. I usually do not like doing an install on these hilts. However, and this is the second time that this has happened with this particular version of this hilt. Let me back up and talk about who makes this hilt. This is the EEDk from One Replicas. This is the second time that I have had the opportunity to do an install on this hilt. And I've come around to not only the design of Count Dooku's hilt, but the install experience in general. In my opinion, as an installer, the One Replicas version of this hilt is by far the most install-friendly hilt. I happen to love the look of it. I also happen to love the fact that we can get this red trigger to be a usable red trigger, right? I like the look of this hilt. And, you know, I typically am not a prequel hilt guy. However, this hilt is a very cool looking hilt. It's one of those iconic shaped hilts. It's just so different looking and so just so unique, right? And this particular version has grown on me. This is the second time that like I said, it's the second time I've been able to do an install on one. I really like it. I like it so much that I've actually reached out to One Replicas and asked if I can somehow get one, because I don't have a Dooku hilt in my collection and I would like to have one, right? So I really enjoyed doing the install on this. I did change up my chassis a little bit, but we're going to talk about all of that. I'm going to talk about the install experience when we come into Fusion, and we are going to do that right now. Let's come into Fusion and take a look. All right, so here's the chassis that I did for the One Replicas Dooku. Let's start at the bottom. I want to talk about speaker placement and speaker sound venting in this hilt. Now, this particular version from One Replicas, I believe that they really wanted to stick with accuracy, right? So we don't have any visible sound venting in this pommel. And the way that this pommel is assembled, okay, this bottom piece will slide off. In fact, I can probably do that right now. So this bottom pommel piece will slide off. This bottom flat part is actually part of the pommel. So there's nowhere for this sound to vent really other than in this rectangular area in the hilt. All right. So you really only have one opportunity for sound venting. Now I really wanted to get a 22 millimeter speaker in this. I've seen builds that use a 20 millimeter. I've seen builds that use a pancake speaker. I wanted to get like a high quality base 22 millimeter speaker in this. And the only reason, or the only way that I could do that is by creating a custom speaker holder that lives inside of that pommel area. Let me take this back off so we can get a look at it. So right here is my speaker holder, and there was a 22 millimeter speaker right in here. All right. This particular 22 is from the Saber merchant. Okay. So I had to go about creating a custom speaker holder that fit into that area perfectly, right? So here's where that 22 millimeter speaker sits. And then I've got my leads for my speaker that come out of this window here and will go through the hilt up to that main chassis. Excuse me. Here is the main chassis. We've got an interesting little nipple here that makes a connection to that pommel section, or the lower section of the hilt. All right. This entire assembly is epoxied into place after I bring all of my wires through. Now, another thing that I really wanted to do with this particular install, well, actually, this was a request. A request of the customer was to light this trigger. Now, we don't see this trigger lit in the films. However, there was, I forget where, I think I may have seen this on the RPF forum. Initially, the prop masters wanted that trigger to be lit, but it didn't make it to the film, right? The customer for this install asked if it would be possible to get that trigger switch lit, and I thought it would be a really, really cool idea. So I had to disassemble this entire lower section of the hilt to get two rectangular red LEDs under here, right? So there are two rectangular LEDs right here underneath that trigger, and I think the end result looks really, really good, right? So once my LEDs are wired, once my speaker is wired, once my negative battery tab is wired, all of my leads come up through here. Let's see if we can get under here. Through here into the main area of the chassis, all right? This is a Profi board build, so that Profi board will slide up underneath this lip, pull forward into these forks to help secure it into place. Excuse me. I also have two rectangular LEDs on this chassis, and then griddly work on each side. Around back, full-size 18650 button-top battery, okay? And then we make our way up to the top. Now there is a 6-rail, sorry, let me back up. I use a 4-rail PCB from stock in this build, all right? So I've got my switch and my blade PCB that needs to be in this upper section of the hilt. I use pull down button or pull down pin to save myself an extra pin for this particular install, right? That's for the switches. So I can wire up my switch to one of my leads. One of my switch leads gets wired up to positive, right? And that extra pin out of those 4-pin PCB is for my other switch leg, right? And then I've got 3 for my blade. Hopefully that made sense. I probably did a terrible job at describing that. But essentially, you can use pull down button in your Profi config to save using a switch lead, right? You can wire up to a positive battery or a positive line on your install. So 4-rail PCB from stock. Here's the upper PCB holder. This just kind of floats in the upper section of the hilt. And I also designed a very, very shallow blade PCB holder. We've got a very, very shallow blade holder up here. So I wanted to take advantage, full advantage of as much real estate as I could to get a lot of blade depth, right? So this is just a custom blade PCB holder. So there's the full assembly. Let's come up top and talk about it. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and put this pommel back on. Very, very well made and well designed hilt, right? If you look, when you take this pommel off, there's like a set screw kind of ball socket here that really helps the pommel to stay in place, to find its way home here. Just a really nice, nicely made hilt. High quality. So, there it is. That's the EEDk from One Replicas, the Dooku hilt. Okay, I have set it up so that the trigger is the main button in this install, and obviously I already have a battery in this. So let's go ahead and take this chassis out. On the underside of this hilt, there is a set screw that is holding that lower section in place. I will go ahead and unthread that. Then you can pull this out. Now here is the chassis. Okay, I did a pewter and black rub and buff treatment on this chassis. There are those two rectangular LEDs. This will take a button top 18650 battery. Okay. And there's that 4-rail conductor from stock. So once you get your battery in, the hilt is on. This does not have a kill switch, by the way. There's no room for a kill switch. So once you put your battery in, the hilt is on. Once you've got your battery in, go ahead and put that chassis back in the hilt. Slide it all the way up until it stops, and then you can put your set screw in place. Thread that in until it stops, and then you are ready to go. Okay. So again, I've set this up so that this trigger is your main, and then this upper button is your aux. Right? This is another thing I really love about One Replica's version of this hilt, is this integrated upper switch. All of these switches are already pre-wired, so it makes install very easy. I actually replaced these wires with a thinner gauge just to make my install a little bit easier. But I love that they're already in place. You don't have to assemble anything. They're just ready to go. Okay. Great hilt. Really, really fantastic Dooku hilt, right? So let's come down to the bottom, get a closer look at it. So there's the EEDk. I'm just going to call it the Dooku, the One Replicas Dooku. Okay. Their naming convention is very interesting. So, whoops. Let's go ahead and put a blade in it. So there is a set screw around the side of the hilt. It does come with a blade plug. I'm going to go ahead and put a blade in it. This will take a 1-inch blade. Rest your blade on those PCB pins. This is a very tight blade socket, which is a good thing. And then you want to tighten that set screw until it stops, obviously. And then you are ready to go. Love the ability to use that trigger down here. So there's that trigger all lit up. Yeah, love that. I really do love that about this hilt. Okay, let's see what else we've got on here. And, you know, I did go over that there's not a lot of sound venting in this pommel, but it does sound very good for for having such a minimal amount of sound venting down there.
Hello, Master. It's been a while.
Such an interesting hilt to swing around because of its shape, right? Let's do one more. So this is a double button or 2-button Profi setup. I have set it up with twist to activate, twist to deactivate, okay? One tap of this aux button will simulate blaster bolts. Hold it down while you clash to simulate blade lockup, okay? And then to scroll through your fonts, it's just a single press of that aux button, okay? All right. So that is it. That is the EEDk, or the Dooku, from One Replicas. A Dooku install that I don't hate doing, right? So, to you, the customer, thank you very much for your patience and support. If anyone has any questions about this particular chassis or install, please do not be a stranger. I am adding this updated version of the chassis to my online index. I will put the link down below in the description. So if anyone is interested, it will be available, right? So that is all I've got. Thank you very much for watching, everyone. And with that being said, may the force be with you always. Have a good one, everybody.